Okay, we're back for part 2, and I want you to look at these. These will be integral to your homework assignment, right? So what are some barriers to delegation, or what do we find? Well, some people believe in the fallacy, if you want it done right, do it yourself. How many of you have heard that? Maybe you've heard one of your parents say it, one of your grandparents, if you want it done right, you got to do it yourself. Well, if you believe that, you're probably not going to be adept at delegating, right? So, lack of confidence and trust in lower level employees. And here's the deal. If you're a leader, if you're truly a leader of people, then why do you have people where you have a lack of confidence in their ability and you don't trust them? That's on you then as a leader, right? You're either not hiring the right people, you're not training them properly, right? Low self-confidence, and you have to be confident, because if you delegate, you're giving something up, right? Which means now you got to go find something else to do, which is cool. I mean, it's a great way to develop yourself as a manager and leader, because you delegate the lower activities, and then you learn to do greater and greater things, right? You might think that delegating is being lazy, right? Or perceived as such. And I'll admit, this is one of my big concerns, and this is why I tend to split grading with my course assistant. Usually about 50-50. It depends how many hours they're signed on for. But if I don't do any grading, then I would feel lazy. I also feel out of touch with you guys because I want to see what it is you're producing. So this is a tough one. Maybe a vague job definition, and we don't know who's supposed to be doing what in the first place. So how do we delegate, and are we delegating something that is within that job description or not? If you take personnel psychology with me, we'll get past this, because what we do is we develop detailed job analysis, which tells us precisely what the responsibilities of a given job are and what they aren't, right? It might be fear of competition or completion from those below. That is that if they do it well, then maybe they become your competitor, right? Reluctance to take the risks involved in depending on others because they might let you down. And there's ways to delegate that minimize this risk. And again, if you're worried that these people are going to let you down, why are they working for you in the first place? Why did you hire them? What attracted you to them? Now, you may inherit employees. You may rise to a management level position, and you're working with a whole bunch of people who are hired from someone else. Well, then you got to get busy, and you got to start setting standards, and you got to set expectations, and you got to start doing training to bring people up to what you consider speed, right? Lack of controls to provide early warning of the problems with delegated duties. That is, if you're going to delegate responsibilities, one of the things you need to do then is have interim checkpoints in those responsibilities so that you can maintain, right, so that you can maintain a critical view of what's going on. And I don't mean critical in a bad way, but I mean a way to analyze and a way to view what is proceeding, right? Have interim measures in place. And it can be a poor example set by bosses who don't delegate, right? That's what we learn from. They don't delegate, so why should I, right? Well, you should, because you're going to be a people developer as you delegate, as long as you're providing resources, again, concomitant with the responsibilities. So, homework 17, suggest a preventative or reparative action for each one of the barriers to delegation listed on the previous slide. So think in terms of an organization. It's good to maybe think of an example of what would be delegated for each one, and then think about a way to get around that issue. Okay? So there are 9 in all. Most can be dealt with a sentence or two. I'm not expecting, a page, written page for each of the 9. I seriously think that at most a moderately long paragraph, but probably a short paragraph is sufficient for each, right? The action must come from either the lecture, and this is where I'm going to hold your feet to the fire, because this is going to be an assignment where I require in-text citations, not a works cited page, but in-text citations, right? It's got to come from either the lecture notes or the textbooks, and that can be Kaneki and Kreitner, Organizational Behavior, or the Deming Management Method, your pick. Please cite either as K&K page number, or Walton, that's the Deming book page number, or lecture XX slide number blah, 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 right? And you're going to submit this as we do, either Word or PDF in the Dropbox on Carmen. Okay? So I'm thinking, you know, most of you have teams of anywhere from 4 to 6, so you have to do like 2 of these each, right? And I really prefer that you guys work together on those. So, and again, identify what you've done. So, behavioral syndrome, then personal initiative, going beyond the formal requirement in a given situation. So, you know, when we say it's not my job, right? Well, make it your job if you want to display initiative. Go above and beyond. Just got to be careful you're not stepping on other people's toes necessarily. It's got to be behavior, hopefully, that's consistent with the organization's mission, and that should be easy to do because you're a good consumer of mission statements, right? Personal initiatives, people usually have a long-term focus. That means, man, this is going to be some extra work for me, but what's going to happen is it's going to pay off in the long run. Right? It's goal direction, it's action-oriented. Okay? Persistence in the face of setbacks is another, you know, kind of criteria of personal initiative. And self-starting and proactive, that is, we're trying to solve problems rather than, one of my favorite phrases ever was to put out fires. Unfortunately, in organizations, when the shit hits the fan and something goes horribly wrong, some people come in, they fix the problem, and they usually get a lot of kudos and a lot of glory. Oh, look at it. They put out the fire, so to speak. Everyone pats the firefighter on the back and says, look at those first responders. Unfortunately, in an organization, if there's a fire, really the question that needs to be asked once the fire is put out is, how did this fire occur, and what would prevent it from happening in the future? That's where the real work is. But notice, that's the person who operates behind the scenes, kind of this meticulous little incremental changer who's constantly improving systems a little bit at a time so that the fires don't occur in the first place. There ain't much glory with that in most organizations, and that's one of the downfalls. What we're essentially doing when we reward firefighters is we're encouraging the setting of more fires or the ignoring of how the fires got set. Because if the fires don't get set, then the firefighters don't get glory. So let's reward the right thing. Let's reward the person who painstakingly figures out ways so that the fire doesn't occur in the first place. And think about it. This is system versus person. So 85% of the effort, according to Deming, right, is about the system, and that's what we operate on so that the fires don't occur. So, what are the levels of personal initiative? Well, taking action, asking for approval, asking someone else to act, telling someone about a problem, non-compliance, or apathy. Notice the person at the bottom of the scale here, apathy, they don't give a shit, and they take no initiative whatsoever because they don't care. Non-compliance, telling someone about the problem, that's a minor level of initiative, right? But taking action is where it's at, right? Sometimes we need to ask for permission, but if we're asking for permission, it's not fully taking initiative. No, that really the top 3 represent some level of personal initiative. The bottom 3 really demonstrate little in the way of initiative. So if you want to be viewed as someone who has or demonstrates initiative, you better be repetitively operating on those top 3 points. No. What about empowerment and that buzzword? Well, what does it mean to empower people? First, you share information with them. And then you create autonomy through the structure. So that the structure of the system that you're designing, the system that you're building, the system that you're continuously improving, right, is an autonomy generating system. So people go into that system, right, feel empowered, feel that they have responsibility, feel they have the ability to make decisions, and a lot of this is supported by adequate training, right? So they're self-confident. And then you let teams become the hierarchy, and you let teams run the show. And you can create teams that, in fact, span the hierarchy. So, share information. Share company performance information, right? Help people understand the business. and that is provide explanatory rationale. Build through trust through sharing sensitive information. And most people can't be trusted, especially if you're hiring the right people, right? And create self-monitoring possibilities so that people can check their own work. And note how important that is to have ways, and we talked about this especially in feedback and rewards. We talked about this with employee evaluations, that they should have the ability to monitor their own progress and consistent with the information. Create autonomy, create a clear vision, clarify the little pictures. So the big picture then makes sense of the little pictures. Create new decision-making rules that support empowerment. So we're going to make decisions based on data rather than opinion, because we know that opinion, it's the person highest in the hierarchy whose opinion wins. Instead, we're going to use data to make decisions, and that empowers everyone. It levels the playing field. Clarify goals and roles collaboratively and have that conversation. What is it we're trying to do? Both big picture, both little picture, both short term, both long term, and who is responsible for what. Establish a new empowering performance management process. So part of management's review on an annual basis would be show us the evidence of the empowerment. How are people empowered? What techniques were used? And what are the effects? And notice, remember the last homework was about survey research. Surveys can inform how empowered the worker believes they are. So we can track people's perception of their own empowerment and use that as part of a manager's promotion and or counseling process. Use heavy doses of training, and everyone's going to have to be trained in this. Look, the people who are being empowered have to be trained, but the managers have to be trained in techniques of empowerment. And empowerment is not just throwing work at people and then walking away and ignoring it. It's checking in, it's advising, it's training, it's measuring. So many managers are worried that if they delegate and they empower people, they won't have anything left to do. Well, that's not the case. They just have new things to do, and they have to learn new things. And often managers don't want to learn new things. They find that scary and frightening. Let teams become the hierarchy. Provide direction, training of new skills within your teams. Provide encouragement and support for change. Gradually have managers let go of control. It's not something that happens overnight or in a moment. A little bit at a time, and develop some kind of legitimate observable plan for so doing, and then reward managers for doing it as part of their performance appraisal. Work through the leadership vacuum stage, this transition of power and authority, right? Because at some point, especially if it's rushed, we may have workers that are not fully empowered or trained, and we have managers that are letting go too early, and it leaves us this vacuum in the middle that can often lead to poor results and just going back to the old way, because this way just didn't work out. We tried it, and people throw up their hands and they say it didn't work out, and we're not going to do that anymore. And acknowledge the fear factor, and remember what Deming said. That's all we need to say about that. So, what is organizational politics, right? Well, it involves the acts, influence to enhance, protect the self-interest of individuals or groups. And when an individual objective runs counter to organizational objectives, we observe increased negativity in organizational politics. Scamming, scheming, lying, cheating, whatever it is. So, for example, increased filtering, concealing, or distorting of information. And we see people hide information. The old term, information is power. Well, think about it. That is true. Information can represent power. What do? Do we share the information, and then that is using information to empower, or do we guard the information, and that's using information as a political tool? Okay? So, uncertainty in organizational politics, well, uncertainty triggers political behavior. People then start defending their turf. And nothing's more interesting in an organization when they say, when someone announces there's going to have to be cutbacks. And immediately what you see is managers saying, well, what departments are going to be hit by the cutbacks and to what extent? And they start maneuvering, and they start trying to protect their own department at the expense of other departments, and perhaps at the expense of the organization. I mean, if the organization has decided it needs to cut back, then it needs to cut back in the most efficient and practical way. But if the cutback is being achieved through interdepartmental competition, then the results are probably going to be less than useful. So we have to lay out clear objectives. We have to stay away from vague performance measures and make them as precise as possible. We've said an awful lot about that in this course. The ill-defined decision-making process, we have to start legitimizing our decision-making process, and we have to be objective about it, and everyone should know how decisions are made, right? We got to step forward and try to eliminate the strong individual or group competition. And I remember Chuck had said something to me when I was at the Wallula mill, and he was talking about Rucker, who was a paper machine superintendent on the #1 paper machine. And he says, Rucker hired another engineer. He's full-blown engaging in his empire building. And that is, Rucker wants to hire as many people as he can when times are good, because if there's a cutback, then he's got like surplus people that he can let go. And also note that a lot of managers, a lot of supervisors are compensated on the basis of the size of their department. So there's a natural tendency for supervisors often to hire more people, as many people as they can, because their pay goes up as a result of managing or supervising more people. Really counterproductive, right? And any type of change scares the shit out of people. And throw two companies into a merger and all bets are off. So when we look at Rhea, what do you see? Rhea, whatever we attempt to change, the political subsystem becomes active. So politics and organization won't go away, and in the face of change, it kind of kicks itself into high gear. Notice that transparency is one of the best defenses against this. So Holmes and Rahe theorized any change is stress-creating. More on that, you can actually take the Holmes and Rahe stress test in Psych of Adjustment, if you so desire. Offered, I think, probably pretty much every fall now. So, 3 levels of political action. What are we looking at? Coalition. This is where informal groups, right, bound together by the active pursuit of a single issue. And this can there can be fuzzy boundaries of membership, structure, duration in this regard, and can be a potent political force when people form a coalition. That is, they group to satisfy a common interest at any given time. Now, network level describes the cooperative pursuit of general self-interest, tend to be people rather than issue-oriented. So at the network level, how many of you have heard the term or been told the importance of networking? And I'm really super not a big fan of networking. One of my chief complaints about LinkedIn, which is a chief networking site, that's what bills itself is, when they send me an email to tell me to go check whatever, in the subject line it often says it's not what you know, it's who you know. And oh my God, I can't tell you how much I deplore that statement. It doesn't come as a surprise, right? But it's these networks, and I'm sorry, most of the shit shouldn't be networked. It should be done by legitimate skill and in response to legitimate need. And then individual level, this is the pursuit of general self-interest. And for the first 10 years of my teaching at Ohio State, this really kind of was how I operated. I'm a lecturer, I'm an independent contractor, I may get a class or not. So I worked really hard to get as many classes as I could, a diverse set of classes, so it would ensure a greater probability of me getting a full course load through work. So it really was at an individual level. And what did I do? Well, I tried to network to a certain extent with my immediate supervisor who made the decisions on course assignment. So there you go. I'd like to think now that in psychology, we have for lectures more of a coalition strategy with superior leaders like Dr. Vasey and Dr. Cravens-Brown. So, political tactics, what do we know? Well, we can attack or blame others. About 54% of people in this survey admitted to using that. We can use information as a political tool. Information is power style. Creating favorable image, that's impression management. You can see all 3 of those are the top political tactics. We can develop a base of support. Okay, that's networking. We can praise others. That is ingratiation. What are some other words for ingratiation? Boot licking, brown nosing, butt kissing. There are some for you, right? We can form power coalitions with strong allies. And this is a reasonable strategy under certain circumstances, political strategy. We can associate with influential people and hope to hell that they bring us up with them. Or we can create obligations, and this is where we put pressure on people. We do something for them and expect a quid pro quo. Not that we've heard anything about quid pro quo in the political or business arena lately, have we? So, about you politically, think about it. Which of these kind of describes you? So, underlying attitude. If the naive of us say, well, politics is unpleasant, I don't want to engage. Right? The sensible approach for most of us, and notice this is not a highly value-driven, this is more practical-driven slide. The sensible politics is necessary to a certain degree. And the sharky among us, politics is an opportunity. Give me more politics because I know how to chew others up and spit them out, right? The intent, the naive people, I want to avoid politics at all cost. The sensible, if it furthers department goals, then maybe we should engage to a certain degree. And then the sharky is self-serving, predatory. The more political the environment, the more likely I am to excel and to go up. And then we see the techniques. So the naive tell it like it is and might get punished for it. The sensible, they network, they expand connections, they use the system to give and receive favors. They know how to operate the system. The sharky are all about manipulation. They'll use fraud. They'll go. And then the favorite tactics, none. The truth will win out. And boy, that's a tough one because often you end up standing alone. The sensible negotiate and bargain and try to create that mutuality of interest as we described earlier. The sharky, they bully, they misuse info, they cultivate and use friends and others. That is, they bring them along, and often they get something on them so they can blackmail them down the road. So think about where you stand politically in all of this. Now, Popeye the Sailor Man, what do we know? Popeye, I am what I am, and that's what I am. And Popeye is what's known as a low self-monitor. He will not change for anyone. High self-monitors are like chameleons. They're very adaptable, and they're willing to change to improve their situation. Okay? So that's impression management. What are some tactics we can use? Well, techniques for good impression management, right? Job focused, performance, right? And this is where objective measures can really help us because we can objectively state, we can demonstrate numbers that indicate an improvement in our performance. So it's kind of a long-term strategy, but it provides some of the most solid results. We can supervisor focused, right? Asking someone else to act. We can use ingratiation. We can use self-focused presentation, right? So these are all ways that to create a better impression. I'm a big fan of the first one. The others kind of weak, right? Now, techniques for poor presentation. If you want to look bad, hey, decrease your performance. Don't work to your potential. Withdraw, right? Display a bad attitude. That'll get you real far, right? Broadcast your limitations. I can't do that because if you want to create a poor impression, there's some tools to put in your toolkit. Now, motives for poor, well, avoidance, obtain concrete rewards or demotions, a desire to exit quite often, and power is another one. So, when we manage organizational politics, right, what can we do? You as a leader, right, you as a small business owner hiring employees, you as a department manager hiring people or promoting people within your department. If someone's overly political, why not screen them out? Try and figure out some way to determine that. Create an open book management system, right? So you take the wind out of the most political sails because they need hidden systems to excel. When you open the system, a lot of people lose their oomph, right? They can't get it done. Make sure every employee has a personal line of sight, measurement in the system, and individual accountability. This is something you build into the evaluation process and the subsequent emotion processes. where are you going to be in this organization? What's your next step, right? That's the line of sight aspect. How are you getting there in some kind of measurable, verifiable way? And that's the measurement aspect. Non-financial folks explain finance and accounting to employees. Because when financial people do it, it's like when my financial guy explains stuff to me. Sometimes I got to get him to stop and do it in plain English. And it's like, I don't, run my psychobabble on him. He probably shouldn't run his financial babble on me, right? Find someone who can say it in plain English terms. Establish formal grievance and conflict resolution processes. And of course, at the mill we had this, at the paper mill, because we were a union shop, so we had a formal grievance process. If you don't have one, develop one. And then have a joint committee hearing the grievances, right? Behave ethically, model ethics, right? If you expect ethics, model it, behave it. And recognize and reward results achieved without politics. So, and again, this is part of the evaluation and the measurement system. So, empowerment and influence, these are your tools, right? And when you see politics coming to the fore, it's usually because there's some problem in the organization that facilitates the use of politics. And politics usually generate a lot of competition and poor results, right? So the influence and the empowerment is the cooperative aspect. Create the win-win situations, measurably, objectively, measurably win-wins, and reward that. And to truly empower people and make them feel better about themselves. And that's a core comment that I have for you guys in this class. As a leader, you have the ability to make people feel better about themselves to help them self-actualize. Or you have the power to manipulate and abuse them. But I know as Buckeyes, what we really want to do is we want to lead people into the future that's meaningful, where they get to experience their own level of competence and they believe that they're autonomous human beings that are involved in making a huge number of their own decisions for the benefit of the organization. So let's keep win-win in our hearts, and let's keep the methods to achieve win-win in our heads, and let's get it done. So you guys, thank you. It's been a weird semester. We've been apart, but hopefully in another year or so we'll get back to normal, and we'll get to share our time together face to face. Take care. Bye-bye.